Thank you for purchasing your Clam X300 XT ice shelter. Today in this video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over the parts and all the pieces, and we're gonna help you through the process of building the shack. Now that we've got everything out of the box, let's go through all the parts and pieces that are inside this X300. So first things first, we're gonna talk about the travel cover. That's gonna be included with your shelter. We've got our cord bag, which we will need here in the next step. We've got our seat cushions, your backs and your bottoms. These are your bottoms. There's 3 of them a piece. So we have 3 bottoms. We have 3 tops, or backs you could say. All right, we have 3 deluxe seats. The last one here. Okay, we have our large light stick. We have our rail support. Next we have our U-channel. Okay, we have our rope. We have our tent. And as you can see, most of our shacks, they come with hammocks inside. And what you'll want to do when you're going time to do the seats, you'll need the hammocks. They will be located within the bag of the tent. Okay, and you will also have an orange sticker that lets you know that this is where the accessory hammocks are located. So don't forget that when you get to the seat part, to make sure to pull your hammocks out. There should be 3 located inside of this tent. All right, then we've got our 2 half hoops, which we will be using to install our light bar. We have our battery bracket, our spreader poles, and last but not least, our inner pack. So now that we've shown you all the parts, let's open up this inner pack and see what's inside. Now that we got it opened up, we got a lot of parts to go through. So first off, we're gonna go through, we've got our slide blocks. We've got our oval slide blocks, and we've got our circular slide box. These will be our seat components that we'll speak about first. We've got those. And then we have all of our extrusion channels, our aluminum channels here. You should have a total of 6. There it is. Total of 6 of those. Okay, and now we're gonna have our rear retainer brackets. That will also be 3. Okay. Our front retainer brackets, which will also be 3. Next, we'll move on to our seat rails. You should have a total of 6 of these. Kind of work through them, they could be in here through them all. Okay, there we go. We've got our 6. Okay, after that, we have our 3 seat swivels. Our tube plugs. We have our canopy poles. We have our pole mounting brackets. we have our seat rail brackets. And with this, I'll open this up here real quick. You're going to have two that are separate from each other, and you'll want to remember that. So you have one that has a curve to it, like so. And then you also have one that is straight up and down. We have our rail support plugs, our two bent porch poles. So everything you need to assemble this house is inside this little hardware kit. Also, there is going to be an Allen wrench located inside as well for all the Allen bolts, so you don't need to go out and get one. So now that we've got everything, let's assemble the light bar. So we're on to the light bar portion of the fish houses. Now, if you have an Ice Team shelter or a Pro shelter, which would be like the X100 Pro, the X200 Pro, the X300 Pro, and the X400, this is going to apply for all of those shelters for your light bar system. So the tools we're gonna need for this is gonna be a cutters, some electrical tape, some type of a drill, whether you have an impact or a regular hammer drill. The main thing you want is a number 2 Phillips. That's gonna be your deal for the screws when we put it in. And then obviously we have the cord bag, the light bar, and then the half hoops. So we will get that portion started here. First, what you're gonna do is you're gonna get your light stick out of there. So we're gonna pull this out. And from there, what you will see is you have some zip ties. Now this is holding the cords together, but also in this bag is the screws that we're gonna use to assemble the light bar to the half hoops. So simply put, and unclip these. Okay. So all those are off now at this point. Now in the bag, you're gonna have your 2 screws there. That's what's gonna be used to lock the light bar into the half hoops. All right. On assembly, what I will do is I'm gonna lay these out. You know, if you have a big table, it's gonna make this a lot easier. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. But we're gonna spread this out, and when you're installing this in, you can either do it on the left or the right side. It doesn't need to be a specific way. I like having the lights or the cord on the left side of the shelter. That's just some way I've always done it. But what I'm gonna do at this point is I'm just going to slide them into place. I'm not putting them in any particular spot. I'm just getting everything put together. So once that process is done, we've got it all put together. We're gonna line up our holes here. Within these half hoops, you're gonna have a hole in the half hoop and in the light bar itself. We wanna line that up, and that'll straighten it out, okay? And then from that process, we're gonna put these screws in to assemble the light bar system. So what you wanna do is when you go into here, I always like to use a magnetic attachment, but get it lined up in the hole, and then I take my hand and I add pressure to it. You wanna add pressure to this so it will bind itself in there and keep everything sturdy. Otherwise, what you could end up doing is stripping the screw if you're not adding too much pressure. So from there, we're going to put it in there, and you don't need to go tight. Once it gets evened out with the hoop pull itself, you are good to go. So that's sturdy, that's in there, that's not going anywhere. Now that we've attached the light bar and the hoops together, we're gonna go on to our final step, and that's wrapping the cord around the pole, attaching our cord bag. So what I like to use is electrical tape. You can find it at any hardware store. And what we're gonna simply do is we are taking the cord here and we are gonna run it along the pole so it is not floppy and all out of place. So what I will do is I like to start right at where the half hoop meets the light bar. So I will start that process, and you don't need to go crazy on your wraps, just maybe 1 or 2. So we'll go around, I'll do one more time. That's in place there, and then you can cut it, or what I like to do is just take my hand and put it free. And now for that factor, we're gonna run along the entire rest of the light bar to get everything set in place, and we'll be back with you with the cord bag. Now that we've ran the wires along the half hoop, the last step to this is attaching the cord bag. Very simple put. You've got 2 Velcro pieces on the back. We're gonna open these up, okay? And what I'm gonna do is simply put it underneath. And you wanna get this tight. You don't want it to be loose where it's flopping around. So what I'll do is I'll stretch it out, get it underneath there, and attach it from there. And we'll repeat the process here. Okay, so that's attached. Now I'll flip it over, and now all we're simply going to do is we're going to wrap up our excess cord. And I like to just put it right back to where it came. And we'll open up that cord bag. I'll fold it, set it inside, close it up, and that is the assembly for the light bar. Now we can start with the seat assembly. This seat assembly will be the same assembly for a variety of our fish houses, which I have listed up here in the corner. And from there, we'll get started and get to step one. All right, so now that we got everything set out, let's get started with the seat assembly process. The tools that we're gonna want for this are a rubber mallet, a 3/8 inch wrench or socket, a 7/16 wrench or socket, some type of a pliers, a Allen wrench, which the Allen wrench will be included within the hardware kit. Otherwise, you can use a T-handle, and that size is going to be a 5/32. Okay, and then what we will want from there is some type of a silicone spray. You can do this if you would like. What it'll do is it'll allow the seats to slide even smoother than they do. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the tube seat rails and the tube plugs in together. There's a couple ways you can do this. You can take it, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to line up the holes in the tube plug with the holes on the tube rail. So I like to line them up, and one thing you can do is give them a push, or if you would like to use a rubber mallet, I like to just get those somewhat close to each other where they're close. Take this and pound it into place. Now we're going to do this for all 4 of them. So a little tip for you, once you get your tube plug into your rail, sometimes they're not always going to line up perfectly, okay? So what I like to do is take the Allen wrench from your hardware kit and go on the inside and just simply turn it to straighten it out. That way, everything will be in line how you need it to be when you assemble. All right, so next process is the extrusion channels. You will have slide blocks. You'll have one that is oval, and you'll have one that is circular. Now, when assembling this, you will want to make sure that you have one circular and one oval slide block on each one of these extrusion channels. So what we'll do is, you'll see a T that is notched in there, and you will line that up with the T on the extrusion channel and simply put, slide it in. Okay, and now we will repeat the process on this side. Now, to note, when we put these together, you will want to make sure that your other extrusion channel lines up with this side. And the reason behind that is it gives a little bit of room for error if it's not perfectly straightened and aligned, and it'll also help the seat slide much better. Now that we have the slide blocks attached, now it's time to screw them on. So we're going to take our 101 147s, take 4 of these, and you'll notice these are a screw. So this is going to be the only screws that come in with your hardware kit. Now note, when you look at your slide blocks, you'll notice on this side you'll have one side that is a smaller hole and one side that's a bigger hole. We are going to want to take the screw and put that through the bigger hole. Now also, you're not going to put your screws in on each side. If you notice, this side has the smaller hole, this one has the bigger. Now I'm going to flip around, and now your circular slide block has the bigger hole on this side, and we are going to attach it there, like so. And what you'll do is you will screw these in, and once these are screwed in to both, we can move on to the next step. So for the seat assembly, we are going to build one seat for you, but this will be the same process that you repeat for the second seat that's in your fish trap. For the next start of the seat assembly process, we've got our channels and our slide blocks connected. Now we're going to take our swivel. And what you want to do with the swivel is you want to turn it into a star formation. So we're going to take it with our hands and just turn it until it looks like so. Then what we're going to do after that point is we're going to take our 106 286 Allen bolts and our 106 284 nuts and attach our channels to the swivel. So what I like to do with this process is flip it over. Your channel is going to sit underneath, so when you think about this, everything's going to be flipped upside down. We're going to take our screw or our bolt and we're going to add it in there. And what I like to do is, I don't like to do it all as fast as I can, but we're just going to get it at this point. We're not going to tighten anything down. We're just going to get the bolt and nut attached. And now what we're going to do from there is we're going to repeat our process all the way around. Now that we have them all attached, everything is still loose. We're going to once again double check to make sure we have everything assembled properly before we tighten down. You're going to want to make sure your ovals and your circular slide blocks are parallel with each other. Okay, so when you flip this over, it will look a little something like this. And from now that process, now that we know that we have everything set to where it's supposed to be, we can tighten down everything and move on to our next step. So once we have our base set up for our seat assembly, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the deluxe seat. So you're going to grab one of your deluxe seats, we're going to flip it over, and we are going to take our 101 470 and attach the swivel to the seat. Now you still have it in that star formation like I showed earlier, and now what we're going to simply do is line the holes up with the holes in the swivel. Okay, from there the process is pretty simple. You're going to want your 3/8 inch wrench or socket for this next process, and all we're going to simply do is put them in. Now what I like to do first is I like to hand tighten every single one of these in, and the reason I do that is because you know that you have it set where you want it, because when you put one in, this has some room to move. Now it doesn't really matter if it moves a little bit on you, that's not going to be the end of the world, but I just like to do this process because then I know I have it set where I want it. So real quick, we'll add the other 4, or the other 2. I'll just hand tighten those in real quick, okay? And then I will use my socket for this process. Like I said, you can use a wrench or a socket, it does not matter, to get this part done. And now you will go into your star formation with it. Now, you don't need to go really tight on this, you just need to get it snug. So like so, like so. Now what I'll do is I'll spin it, and now finish the process. From there, our swivel, our base is now attached to the seat, and we can move on to the next part. So now that we've got the seat, we've got everything on it, we're going to move to the seat rail tubes. Now, quick tip for you, when these go in, they go in just fine. But sometimes, you know, they can be kind of hard to move. They slide very freely, but if you want to get a little bit more out of your tubes and your sliding, what we like to use is some type of a silicone spray. And what I will simply do is I will take myself a rag, it doesn't matter if it's a paper towel, whatever you have at home, just spray a little bit, just enough to get it wet. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly spin this and make sure that we get that silicone spray on all of them. From that point, this becomes very slick. So as you can see there, that runs pretty darn free through there. That's just a real quick tip if you want to get a little bit more added sliding capabilities out of your seat system. So now that we have our tubes inside of our slide blocks, we're going to now work on our front and rear retainer brackets. So here is your front retainer bracket. It doesn't matter on which side you start on with one of these because it all moves in the end, so you can get it where you want it to go. But what we're going to look for on this retainer bracket is you're going to have one side that just has a hole drilled just for the size of the bolt itself. Then you're going to have another side that actually has an oversized hole that leads into the same exact hole that we saw on the other side. You're going to want this to be facing up for you in this process. So what we're going to simply do is we're going to take these 2 holes, we're going to line them up with the tube, we're going to slide them on, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to line up the holes on the tube with the retainer bracket. Okay, so now once that's set, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our hammocks that we pulled out of our tent bag and our 106 456 bolts. You're gonna want 4 of these, okay? And we're gonna attach this all. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these bolts and I'm going to slide them in, okay? Sometimes they may go in a little snug. That's not a bad thing at all. So it'll keep everything in place while you're working through this process. So got those 2 in, okay? Now we're gonna take our hammock and we're gonna attach it. Noted this here, when you put the hammock on, you wanna make sure that this strap right here faces down on the slide blocks. If you notice here, you have one side with the strap and one side without. When the hammock sits under this thing, it's going to look exactly like this. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it from looking like this and I'm gonna flip it over on top of it. Okay, so now from there, we've got 4 corners with holes, okay? So we're gonna take this, slide it through the notch, get it over the top of that bolt, okay? And then from that point on, now we can take our nut and tighten it on the top. Something I like to use is like a magnetic socket if you have one at home. It makes it very easy if you've got fat fingers like me. Otherwise, we'll show you both processes of how you can do this. So what I'll simply do is I'll just take that magnetic socket there, okay? And I will attach the nut inside of there. And what that's gonna allow me to do is go through that top hole and just get it tightened down onto it. Now you don't need to go crazy. All we're doing at this point is just getting it on. We're just getting it snug. So now that side's done. And say you do not have something like this handy, you can just take your fingers and we'll make sure we do the same process right here as we did. Slide this through. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll take my fingers and I'll go underneath. Okay, do the best I can. I'll actually take my thumb, go into the insert hole up here to kind of keep it straight, and I'll just slowly just get it snug. Okay, now that was pretty simple. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna repeat the same step on the other side with a different, which is gonna be our rear retaining bracket. Now here's our rear retaining bracket. You can notice it's much different from the front retainer bracket, but one little quick tip to know which one is which is your clamp right here. So you will have that on here, and what this will do is this will connect your seat system to the seat rail of the fish house. So now what we're gonna do is we have our top side, okay? And then we have our bottom side. What I'm gonna want is I'm gonna want this bottom side right here, and that's how it's gonna go on. So we're gonna do the same process as in front. So I'm gonna line up these holes like so. So it will sit like that. We're gonna take our 2 Allen bolts, slide those in, like so. Now what we're gonna wanna do for this process is we will wanna grab some type of a pliers. A needle nose pliers I think works the best for this. And what it is these hammocks are meant to be tight on the bottom and they're not meant to be very loose. So sometimes you can just take your normal hand and you can stretch it enough where it will just slide right over the top of there like so. But other times, sometimes they may be a little bit tighter, so that's when this will come into hand. And what I'll do is simply take it, I will just grab onto the end of it, okay, and just pull. And it doesn't take much effort. So now that that's done, I can just take my 2 nuts and lightly tighten them on. Okay, now what we'll simply do after that, now that we have the assembly all put together how it should be, now we're going to tighten everything down. A little way of how I like to do it is I like to take the seat system, flip it over. What I'll actually do is I will push it as far forward as I can, and I will actually hang this off the edge of a table. Now what this is going to allow for me to do is it's just going to make things a lot easier. I like to use a impact if I can, but you can also use your Allen pieces as well. With the Allen wrench, or if you do have a T-handle style, remember this is a 5/32, you can use that as well and make the process easier. We'll also use our 7/16" wrench. So now what I'll do is I'll take this, go underneath, kind of hold it there, and I'm going to use this to tighten the process. Now what I tell people to do when they're tightening this is what I like to feel, and I'll show this to you, is I like to see a little bit of thread past the nylon lock nut. So if you can see there, I'll use my hand and it's about 1 thread past. You want to make sure you do that because that will allow this nylon lock nut to lock the bolt in place so it cannot back out on you. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to repeat the process all the way around. Now that we've got everything assembled on the seat side, it's time to put on the covers. So what we'll do is we're going to fold up our seat. We're going to have it sitting like we normally would. And what I like to do is I like to start with the bottom cushion first. There's no real right or wrong way that you have to do it. It's just that's how I like to start it. And what I'm going to do from there is take these Velcro pieces, straps, just undo them. We're going to push these through the back like so, because they will wrap around the underside of the seat here once we get everything done. And in the front, you're going to have kind of a little slot for it to slide into the front of the seat. So I'm going to get it in there. It's kind of tricky to do. So you just kind of maneuver it and work it a little bit, but it will go in very easily. So once we got that, give it a little push, get it where I like it. Now I can attach the straps. So a quick trick to do here, don't do it while the seat system's sitting like this. Have everything parallel and straight with each other like it would be sitting down, so you're going to have a little bit of room to work with here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that strap is flat and not twisted. Go underneath, find your loop, and just simply tighten it down. Very easy process to do here. This is probably the easiest part about this entire seat system. And we'll just go back, do the same thing real quick. Find it here, just like so. Tighten it down. The bottom's done. Now we're going to repeat that same exact process for the back seat cushion. So from there, same deal, same process. Gonna slip it over the top here. Get it where we want it. I'm going to take my straps, pull them back behind me, and then what we will do from there is tighten them down. Don't need to go crazy on it, just enough to get it put in place. Now, one more reminder, now that we're finished up with the seat assembly process, I showed you one. Okay, and your next seat is going to be assembled the exact same way. So if you have any questions or thoughts of how to do it or can't remember something, just rewind the video here and go through the process again. It'll be the exact same way. So now that we're done with the seats, let's move on to the fish house. Now that we've finished the seats and the light bar, now we can move on to building the frame of the house. But before we do that, I want to stress this enough. If you have a runner kit, any type of accessories, like the battery bracket for this house or anything else in general, take care of that before you build the frame of the house. It's going to make it a lot easier to do that, because if you get the whole frame put together, get the tent put on, you're going to have a real tough time when it comes to putting the runner kit or any accessories on. So I always stress that enough to make sure you take care of all of your accessories first, and then from there, then you can move on to the frame. So we're going to start off with our battery bracket. So this is what comes in with the house. And what I tell everybody is make sure that your light bar, where your light, where the cord is running down on the pole, make sure that matches the same side. Now on the X300, there really isn't a whole lot of option of where to put it, since you have a 45 lip right here, okay, and then you got a flat right here. So I'm always going to put it on this side, and something I always do too in general is I always put it on the right side of the house, if you're looking out of it, or the left side if you're looking into it. So with that, we're gonna get our battery bracket. Okay, you'll have an instruction manual of how to do it, but we will be showing you that today. And then you'll also get your hardware. Now, for 99% of this house, it's gonna be all Allen bolts, okay? But when we get to the battery bracket, we are into Phillips. So this is a number 3 Phillips, okay? So remember that. So what you're gonna want for this process is a number 3 Phillips. And then for the drill bit, a 19/32, a 7/16. You can use an impact, or you can use just a regular wrench. I prefer an impact if it's available. And then you want a black permanent marker so you can get your markings to drill your holes properly. So with that being said, we'll get this in. We'll start off with the battery bracket. Now, a little note here, as you can see, there's a foam insert, okay? Pull that out. And you can either take it out if you have a bigger battery. Bigger batteries, I mean by like a 30 amp battery or something of that sort. But if you're running the small standard sonar batteries, then you will want this to keep it snug inside. So, but underneath, it is not glued in, okay, because that's an added option. So if you want to put it in, which I always do, you just pull the piece back from the tape. Okay, that'll all be on there. We just pull all that out. That one. And then that one. Okay. And then what I'll actually do is you noticed it was sitting in like this when we first put it in. Okay, what I'm actually going to do is I flip it around. And we just set it underneath. Okay, what that's going to allow to do, if you see that little notch right there, that's going to allow for this strap to move around and do its thing. Okay, and then we just push down and press. Okay, make sure it hits the corners. Okay, now that's set in place and you're good to go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my first mark. Okay, now you've got the holes for the rail support right here. What I like to do is just go a little bit farther off of it. You can bring it low or you can bring it high. I like to bring it up a little bit higher just in case if you get snow or you have other things on the bottom, stuff like that. I like to bring it up a little bit higher, but what I'll first do is I'll first mark my first hole. Okay, take that off. And then we're gonna drill that. So we'll get that there. Okay, we got our first hole drilled. And from that point on, I'm gonna install my first bolt. Okay, so you're gonna have a bolt, a washer, and a nut. I'm gonna put that through there. I'm gonna get this set up, and what I like to do to make it easier, I will stack it on top ahead of time, so then it's all set and ready to rock and roll. Flip it over and just kind of hold it like so. Put that through, and I will hand tighten it for the moment, but now I will actually tighten it. Okay, and the reason that I'm doing this is when I get this tight, now I can adjust this and I can move this around to get it right where I want. If anybody's nitpicky like I am, I like it absolutely perfect. So that's why I do it this way. And so we'll just real quick tighten her in. Okay, so that one's done. Now what I can do at that point is I can set this thing where I want it to be. So you can use a level if you want. What I like to do is I'll actually kind of put it where I think it should be. So I'm thinking it should be right around there. And now I'm just gonna walk back to the other side and double check. Things look pretty good. I'm happy with it. So now we can finish the rest. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through real quick. I'll press in, mark my holes. Okay, and now at that point, I can just flip this thing right up. Now I can drill out the rest of my holes. We can put all the bolts in there, get it tightened down, and we'll be good on the battery bracket. Now that we've got all of our accessories installed, we've got everything out of the package, we're gonna start off with the rail support. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install the rail support brackets. Now note here, 2 of them are separate from each other, okay? So the biggest thing we're gonna do is we wanna make sure this one right here, which is gonna be your 104-901, is going to be mounted on the 45-degree side of the tub. Otherwise, if you need to know, it will be on the side that the holes of the rope are, okay? And then for this one, which is our 102-083, that will be mounted on the side next to your battery bracket. So we will first start off with this one, okay? So what we're gonna want for this is we're gonna want our 106-286s. We're gonna want 2 of these, and we are also gonna want 2 of our lock nuts, which are 106-284s, okay? Now what we need to do with this one that's gonna be separate from that one is we're gonna wanna tighten this one down right away. And the reason I say that is when it comes time to put the rail support on, we're not gonna be able to get into these bolts to be able to tighten everything down. So we wanna make sure that we do this first. So what I like to do is just put them in there, put them both in at once, and you're done. Hold it like guitar strings. And then we are going to hand tighten them first. And then from that point, I am going to tighten these down right now. So you'll want to grab your Allen wrench that comes in with your kit there. And what I'll use an impact for this. You can use a regular wrench if you want. 7/16" wrench is what you'll want. And then a 5/32 Allen wrench if you decide you do not want to use the one that comes in with the hardware kit and you'd like a T-handle. So what we're going to simply do here real quick is we're just going to tighten these down. So I will get that in. Okay, make sure it's straight. Looks good. That. Okay, now that one's tight. Now we can move on to the other side. We're gonna grab 2 nuts, 2 Allen bolts like we did before. We're gonna do the same process. I'm just gonna slip them in. Okay, now with this one, when I tighten down, the first one I wanna do is the top one. So, because if I do the bottom, it's gonna give this an opportunity to slip out. And when it slips out, your bolt's gonna fly out. So, make this simple, I'll do the top one first. All right, and then make sure when you are doing this, that you have this area right here, the notched out area, faces upwards. You do not want this bottom area with the longer slit facing upwards. So this is how it should sit when it's sitting on there. If you do it the other way, it's not gonna sit correctly and you're gonna have to take it out and redo it again. So this is where the rail support will rest on and where you will bolt into it. So from that point now, I can tighten this down and we can move on to the next step. All right, now that we've got our rail support brackets put in, now we're gonna work on the rail support. So you're gonna have 2 plugs for your rail support. If you notice, one side is notched out right there. That is the side that we're gonna want to put into the hole to match up with here. So if you can see, there's a hole right there. See with my thumb, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna make sure that's facing the same direction and just push it in. Do that side. And then I will repeat that same process right over here. Make sure that that slots down, point it into it, put it in, give it a tap, and you're good to go. So next thing we will do is we will add this onto here. So what I'm gonna actually do, since this is a much thicker tub, I'm going to put in one side first, which is going to be that 45 area. So if I need to have a little bit of help to maybe push along, since this is a very thick tub, it's one of the thickest tubs that we create, I have that option. And this just makes it a lot easier to do it on this side because you won't have that leverage if you need to do something like that. So what I'm gonna now do is I'm gonna grab my newer bolts here. Okay, we're gonna add those in, and then once we do that, then we can work on that other side. Push that in, and then I will put the lock nut on the back side just to keep it there so it stays in place, so it doesn't move anywhere. When we go to do this one of the biggest things you want to know is when you are putting these on, make sure that this Allen bolt side is facing towards the front of the tub. So what I mean by the front of the tub If you see these 3 holes here, even this 4th, these 3 holes here is going to indicate that this is the front of the tub, and we want to make sure that that Allen bolt side is facing the front of the tub. So I'm going to put it in back this way, okay? And so what we want to do is we want to add some pressure onto this. Okay, as you can see, it's a little bit longer than the other. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some pressure to it. We're going to push to get that going. And then I can basically take my thumb and keep that added pressure and work it in. There we go. That one's in like that. So like I said, this is a much thicker tub. So when you do this, it's always nice to have a little bit of pressure to push on this side. Otherwise, have a second person if needed to just hold on to the tub for you so you can put it in there. It's always going to go in there just fine. It's just sometimes the way it is. So after that, I will get that snug on there. And from that point, we will tighten these down and we'll move on to the next step. So we got the rail support installed. Now it's time to move on to the pole mounting brackets. So these are pretty simple to do. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take 3 of our 106-286. We're gonna add that right there. I like to put these all on right away. Just makes the task a little bit easier. Like I said, once again, just like a guitar, hold them all in there, get them set in place. Let it sit, and then we will grab 3 of our 106-284 locking nuts, and we will just get them hand tight. And the reason we're going to do hand tight on these right away is because we will need to do a little bit of adjusting when we get that first one done, when we get the first one tightened in, just to make sure that the mounting bracket is straight with the tub. So we don't have anything curved, anything kinked, or anything like that. All right, so now we got this one done. Move over to the other side. We'll get the same thing done on this again. So we've got the first one tightened down. I like to do the rear one at the beginning of this, and the reason I say that is because if you notice here, we got a little bit of movement. So the biggest thing we want to make sure, like I had stated, is that this mounting bracket is running straight and true with the tub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back, I'm going to look at it, we're off a little bit. So I'm just going to turn it in, and it looks like we're good now. So now from that point, I feel good of where it's at, so now I will continue to tighten down the rest of these bolts. So now that we've gotten our mounting brackets installed, it's time to install the poles. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the bent porch poles. You notice here, it is notched out at the end. It is actually notched on both sides. If you look through it, you can see me. We don't need to worry about what side we need to mount these on. So we're just going to mount these on. We're going to use our 106-331s. So we'll get these out of the package. All right, from there, now we'll mount it on. Pretty simple. Make sure, too, that the Allen head is going to be facing on the outside here instead of the inside. So if we do it on the inside and go like this, that's going to come in contact with the tent and it's going to rip, and you're not going to be one happy camper. So we want to make sure we do it right. So we're just going to put that through, put that in just like so. That one's in place. Then we'll move on to the next one. Now when I get to the straight poles, I will start with the last hole on the bottom and work my way up. One thing we want to make sure of is that we've got a notched end and we have a non-notched end. We want to make sure that notched end is facing inside of the house. This is where the RPSX clip is going to clip into, keep everything. So we want to make sure that's facing inward. So I'm going to make sure we're facing inward, and then I'm going to repeat that same process again. Do that one. Now we'll run back onto this one, do the same thing, make sure the notched end is sitting on the inside, and then I will run up to the second hole, put it in like so, and then we will do that again. One more time, we'll get the notched end, put that through like so, okay, and then from that point, we can take our lock nuts and we can just hand tighten them down for a moment, just to keep them there. Now that we got this side done, we'll work our way over to the other side and get that done as well and repeat our process. Now that we have everything bolted down, what we do here is, what I like to do is I like to get it tight right off the bat so it really can't move on its own. As you see, that's in place there. My biggest thing is I want to make sure that everything is as close in the mounting bracket as possible so it's not sloppy at all. Okay, so what I'll actually end up doing is I'll tighten it down, and then I will come back again to each individual one, and we'll get that there. We'll use this one as an example here, and I will actually loosen it up. And so what I will do is I'll just grab it and I'll just lightly loosen it up. I'm actually tightening it. But once I get to the point where it falls on its own, that's going to make this process a lot easier when it comes to setting up and taking down your ice house at the end of the night. You're not going to be fighting the poles. They can just do their thing on their own and everything's going to run smoothly. So that's just a real quick tip, something that I like to do when building the house. So now that we've got all of our canopy poles put on, mounting brackets, the frame is pretty much complete. Now we're going to move on to the final step of the frame, and that is the hoop poles. So when you get your base and everything out of the package, you will notice that the hoop poles aren't sitting inside. Well, they're actually sitting in the bottom of the box. So if you look here, I've got 3 hoop poles. They're pretty darn big. And these are what we're going to be using. So we'll need our 3 hoop poles. And what we'll need after that is we'll need our light bar. And we'll get this process started here. So I'm going to grab the light bar. And you're gonna want to pay attention to how I'm doing this, because there's a certain step on where this light bar goes in. So first thing we're gonna do is the RPSX clips. And what I simply like to do is I like to take these all right away. You've got the little button in the inside. What I like to do is grab onto the clip, pull straight out, and turn it sideways. Now you know that that's disappeared in there. That's just gonna make that a lot easier when it comes to actually putting these on the hoop poles. So I'll go through, I'll do this really quick. It takes a couple seconds, and then we're ready to roll. All right, perfect. Now that we've got those all done, let's move to our first hoop pole. So first thing we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna wanna grab just one of our regular hoops, okay? This is pretty darn tall, so I'll move her back a little ways to show you here. But we want to put our RPSX clips on, okay? So on this RPSX clip, we have a tab on the back. And if you see, there's a little button in there, okay? So what we want this tab to do is actually go inside this hoop pole, and it'll clip, and that button will come out right there to lock it in place. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to slide it on. Okay, I'm at the end there. I'm going to push in and then move it again. And as you can see, that button clipped in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat that process for all these as we go through, and I will put them on as we go through. So we'll get that one. We'll get the next one here. I'll put that in there. Get her till she clips in. She's clicked in there. Now we can add our first hoop pole on. So what we're going to do here now is, what I like to do is I like to take my hand and I will actually hold on to the entire hoop pole and basically use my arm to keep that in place, and then the side of my chest under my armpit. And that'll just hold that there for me. And we want to start with the bottom pole. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get that one in there. I'm not going to go all the way with it, just a little bit to get it on there. And then what I'll do is I'll move over to this side, and I will add that second one in. So now that we got that, now I can work on moving that pole forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of tap it. And what we're doing is we're trying to get this even. And once we get it there, sometimes you'll have to move these poles a little bit out of the way to get things moving good. But once you hit that certain point, it'll all come together. So there we go. Get that in there. Now I can move it forward. And that one's in. So now the next step that we're going to work on is getting the next one in. Now, this is where I said pay attention. Now we're going to install our light bar, okay? We always want the light bar being on the second canopy pole from the back. So that way, this is going to allow this light bar to stay straight over the top of you, okay? And now I also want you to remember where we installed that battery bracket, because where we installed that battery bracket, we want our cord bag to match up with. So we don't have, you know, wire running all over the place and doing all that fun stuff. So now what I will do is same process with the RPSX clips. We'll add those on. Get them clicked into place there. Now we'll go to number 2. And we'll get this one on. Same process. This is a very repetitive process, but it looks great in the end. So now that we got that, my battery bracket is located, like I said, on the flat side of the tub. You can see it right there. So I'm gonna make sure that my cord bag lines up with the same side. So same thing again, I'm gonna hold into it in my armpit like I do. We'll get that second one on there, we'll just get it started. We'll do the same thing for right here. We'll get it going. So, and what I would say too, a little quick tip when you are doing this, is when you do add them on there, make sure that you at least get the RPSX clip lined up and at least the pole sitting over the top, because if you don't, it's gonna catch that ridge right there and you're gonna fight it without even knowing it. So as long as you do that right away, you're good to go. Now what I'm gonna do is, like I said, work it in there. Whichever way you put it on, that's the thing, that's where it kind of all goes into play here. So one side's gonna be a little more. Once you finally hit that breaking point though, you're going to just slide on real nice. So now that we got that one on there, now we can finish up with our next. Same process all over again. We're gonna add the RPSX clips. I'll do that real fast here. All right, we've got all 3 of them on. Now, we'll do the final step here of the poles, but there's a kicker to this. I'm actually not going to put this pole on with the frame yet. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add 1 RPSX clip. And the reason I am doing that is because we will actually need this pole when we do the tent. So if we put it on now, we're gonna have to take it off again. So I'd rather not do that because this will actually slide through the bottom of the porch on the tent there and keep the tent into place. So I'm gonna add 1 RPSX clip. I'm gonna leave the other one in the tub, and from there we'll move on to the tent. All right, so now that we're almost done assembling the house, just before we get the seats put in and get the tent put on, we need to put on our hang hooks. And what these hang hooks are is for the skirt that runs across the front of the fish house itself. So pretty simple. You'll find them in your inner pack. And what you're gonna need is these 2 hang hooks, like so. Should have 2 of them in a bag. And then also what you're gonna get, okay, these are going to be for the front of these hang hooks. So as you can see, we got those right there. And what we're gonna end up doing here is we are going to take these bolts and we're just gonna thread them on. So they're gonna go right there, okay? Followed by that, we're gonna take a washer. Okay, and basically what this is just going to be the back brace of it. So once we get all that put together, we're going to take one of our washer style lock nuts that come in the bag there that we use for the houses, and we'll take it, we're just going to insert in the front, and then through the back you won't need a washer since the washer's already included onto this, and we're just going to tighten it down. So then at that point what you would do is we tighten that down, and then we'll repeat the same exact process for this. And then we'll move on to the next step. So once you get that part of it done, it's pretty simple. Get these tightened in. You want them to hang upwards, okay? So once you get them tight, get them to hang upwards, and then what we're gonna do from that point is we're gonna do our corners for our hang hooks. So what we're gonna do here for these is pretty simple. So you've got a washer. Okay, that part number for this is going to be your 104019. That's going to have everything you need in there. So now what we're going to do is we're gonna take our washer, we're gonna insert that on the top there, like so. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna come into the corner here. So it's right here in the corner. We're gonna put that through. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the small lock nut that came with. We're gonna insert this first. You wanna make sure that the hook is hanging up. Then we're gonna insert that like so. And then we will simply tighten on the nut. Now when you go to tighten this down, you don't need to go crazy on it. I like to leave a little bit of slack in it, and basically what just makes it a lot easier when you're hanging the skirt on there for the day. So what I essentially do is I will screw it down until I feel the threads. So now that I know that the threads are just past the lock nut, I know that I'm good to go. So if you notice, it can still move around free, so it gives me room to move and be able to get the hook hanged in there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish this assembly process here, and the next thing we'll be ready to do is put the tent on. We're ready to put the tent on, but first thing we wanna do is we wanna get our seats in. So the reason that we're putting our seats in is we want that extra weight added into this tub. So when you're flipping this tent over, you don't have it flopping on you, and you can keep the base nice and settled down on the floor. So it's not at any different angle, and you're gonna get a good reading for when you actually do set your tent. So all we're gonna simply do is just set them inside for now. And so 3 of them. So plenty of room for 3. All right, so we got those set in there, and this is what it'll look like when it's stowed away for the night too when you're going. So, but anyways, now we got the seats in there, so it's time to do the tent. All right, so before we put the tent on, we want to get the U-channel warm and ready to go. So what we use here is we use what we call a hot box because we're doing multiple houses in a day, so we need to have them all warm at once. So we're putting multiple U-channels in, but for you, a bucket with warm water. So what you're going to want to do is you want to get water that's just about boiling. You want it very hot. So if you've ever fitted a mouth guard for yourself or for somebody else, it's exact same concept. What we're trying to do is we're trying to loosen up the U-channels. So for the time being, what we'll do is we put some hot water in here, and then what I would do is I'm going to crunch this thing up the best I can because I want to get this far down to that bucket. So a 5 or 6 gallon bucket is going to do great for this. And so we want that warm water. Don't take this out in the cold because if you're doing it in the cold, it's going to make it a little bit tougher, so you're going to want to be very fast on it. So what I'll do is I'll just scrunch this all together, put it down as far as I can, and what you basically need to do is if you let that sit for 2 to 3 minutes, basically the time it takes to put the tent on the fish house, it should be ready to go for you when you're ready to install it. Okay, so now we're ready to put the tent on. So what I'm going to do here is you've seen us do it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to show you a new way that I like to do it. Makes it a lot easier, and that's by flipping the tent inside out and installing it like that. Just makes it really easy when it goes to setting and flipping over, and you'll see that throughout the video here. I would definitely advise 2 people when you are doing this tent. This is a heavier tent and a heavier house, so it makes it a lot easier. So first thing I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take it and I'm going to get it all unfolded. So I've got this laid out like this. What I want to do now at this point is I want to find the back side of the house. So after I flip it out, I'm going to start to look for it. So with this, you have the skirt that's going to wrap around the whole front perimeter of the house, okay? So this I already know is the front of my house. What I want to find is the part of the tent that does not have the skirt. So right here, here's the part of the house that does not have the skirt, as you can see the difference here. And this I know is the back end of the house. So now I'm going to identify that I've got 2 the 2 back windows. So we've got that. Now I'm just going to simply unfold it, and I'm going to start flipping it out. What I'm looking for when I do this is I'm looking for the Clam logo. So that's going to help me identify that this is the back of the house. So this would be the back part of your fish house. And then also on all the straps, they're going to have a normal thicker Velcro, okay? But what I'm looking for in the center of the house is these 2. So this is the only one part of the house that's going to have 2 separate straps, okay, for the rear. So you want to look for that. That's how you know this is your rear center. So this is what we want to look for. So now that I've identified that I have my rear center, I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to bring it back to the house. All right, so now that we're at the back of the house, I've got all of my poles extended. Now, remember, do not install your floor porch pole yet. You want to wait on that, and the reason you want to wait on that is because in the front of this canvas, you're going to have to slip it through sleeves. So we're going to save that for the end, and we'll get started though on the back here. So I've still got the tent flipped out inside out, and what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the rear is facing forward. So the Clam logo needs to be facing away from me. And I'm going to find my center, just like so, and I will start from there. So Clam logo is facing away. Now what I'm going to simply do is Velcro them. You don't want to go tight on these, okay? Remember, this tent needs to move. It needs to move through the wind when you're setting up, when you're tearing down, flipping over. So I like to have a little bit of leg room. You know, keep at least 1 finger's worth of movement. You know, you can go more than that. So you don't need to go tight on these. That's the one thing I can't stress enough. As we go too tight on them, and then things can tear because things are too tight, so they can't move freely like they're supposed to. So I got the centers on. Now we're going to do this same thing. I'm not going tight on it. I'm leaving wiggle room in between there. Okay, now what we're going to simply do is I'm just going to go through quick on this, and we're just going to basically repeat the process up the ladder here. So do this one. Okay, now I've got that rear on, so it's stretched out. Now we'll move to the next. Once again, finding my center. Okay, next we'll go into the light bar, keeping it loose. All right, we're all the way up on the final pole here. So the last set of Velcro that you're gonna need is going to be just behind the cargo nets that are on your fish house. So you're gonna find them, they're gonna be right in a line with it, so you'll see it right where the thread mark is. We're gonna do that same thing here. Just really quickly mount that on there. Okay, now I'll look for my next one. Same thing, they're all gonna be in a line with each other, so once you find one, you're gonna find the rest really easily. And then the third one. So, pretty simple. And Velcro it in. So the biggest thing that we've got it all done, we're ready to go, we're almost ready for the front porch pole to be installed on. But what you wanna make sure of, and this is already done, but with these X300s, they have a skirt, and what most of them do is that most of them come assembled. So what I mean by assembled is they're Velcroed together and they're clipped in. So at that point, what I want to do is, if you do not take this apart, you're going to find yourself into issues and kind of wondering what's going on. Why is this tent really tight? Well, this is the reason. So make sure before we do anything to flip the tent over, we separate those from each other. So now that we've got that done, what I'm going to do is I need to find the front of the house, which is pretty simple since we've got it all done. You're going to find 2 seam ends. And what I like to do is I like to go grab those both. And then what I'll do is I just like to lay this on top of it. So, and that's just going to make the assembly of the porch pole a lot easier. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of lay that across and get it started like so. Okay, and then I'm going to take my porch pole and I'm going to install it. Now make sure you keep one RPSX clip off. You're going to slide this through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come find my first sleeve, which is going to be right here. Your first sleeve is going to be on the side. Okay. And then I'm going to get that started by slipping it on. And if you have 2 people to do this part, it makes it much easier because one can kind of help guide as it goes through, because this is longer, so you got to pull. You know, as you're going, you got to kind of pull things with it. Okay, and then, like I said, all we're doing is slipping it through. So if you don't have anybody and you're just doing it yourself, That's what I like to do. I like to just lay the pole across. There's not really an easy way to do it by yourself, so you just kind of work with the tent, let the tent work with you, and you'll get it through. So it's a pretty big house. Okay, so I've got that. Slide this stuff down to kind of make some more space. Okay, now I can finish sliding through here. And this is our final one, so I get that through just like that. Okay, now I'm just gonna kind of push everything down. We got that. Slid into paste. All right, so now what I'm gonna do before I do anything else is I'm gonna get these attached. So I'll come around and I'll grab my front piece, put that in like so, turn this. There we go. We got that side. Now we're gonna take our second one, do the same. Now make sure too when you're doing this so you don't run into problems, make sure that these ends are on top of the square piece. Because if you go just a little bit off or one side leans off, it'll allow that pin to fall out a little bit, which can kind of make it hard to get in. So make sure that they're like this. And it'll slide right on. Clip that into place. All right. Turn it sideways again. Okay, that's on. Now, we're just gonna stretch things out, make sure this smaller sleeve is on the outside. Now you're gonna have 2 Velcro pieces on each corner. So once again, do them loose. You don't want them tight, especially here. You wanna allow this porch pole to move as freely as possible. So, let's finish this process. There we go. So now that we've got that done, we'll work on our other Velcro. You have 2 sides right here. I wait to do these basically until the house is flipped over. So next step, we're gonna flip the house over. Okay, so now we're ready to put the tent, we're ready to install it and flip it over. You're probably wondering, you know, this whole time, like, why did I put it inside out? But once we flip it and set it, you're gonna see exactly why we did that. So everything just kind of falls into place. So you're gonna definitely want 2 people for this task. I got my buddy Cesar with me. He works on the production line. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab all the poles. Okay, we're gonna start from the back hoop pole. And on the count of 3, we're gonna flip it and get it vertical, okay? So 1, 2, 3. So we've got it vertical, and now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna kind of pull it apart from each other. So if you see there, it all just kind of folded out into place, and that's what we want. So from this point, Cesar is gonna hold on to the pole on the other side while I go to the back and I put some clamps in. So what we're doing with these clamps here is we're just holding the tent in place. Okay, so now that we've got that all in place, okay, we can kind of push it back because we want to get it on the table. This is a long fish house, so it sits at the bitter end of my table. So now that I know that it's at the table, we can do our adjustments. But first thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna walk around. We're gonna check everything. And what I like to do is I like to hit on the front of the house, and what that does is if there's any material that rolled up while we were in the process of it, it'll bring it down. So, because this is the most critical part of building your fish house, is making sure your tent's set properly. Because if you have it too high, you're gonna have a lot of wind coming through. So we wanna make sure it's set just right. Okay, so we'll come to the back here. We'll look in our corners on our seams. So move that over a little, and what I want to do is make sure they basically match up. I want this to be pretty much evened out. So that side, this side could come over just a hair, not much. But then what I'll do is just a hair, just move it over just like that. Add that clip on there, and then once again, come to this back here. Just kind of hit it. If there's any excess material that rolled up, we can get that so we can get this thing set perfectly. So now at this point, we've got it. Now I'm just gonna do a quick check over of the tent, make sure everything's like it's supposed to be. Everything looks pretty darn good. Okay, and now we've got the tent pretty tight, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna tighten it just a little more. So what we want is for this pole to still be touching. So it's touching right now, and as you watch here, you're gonna watch this as I pull on the back. You're gonna watch it do and mold itself into place. Now you don't want this to be tight, you want it to be touching, so just remember that. A little bit of slack in the tent is not a bad thing. So from that point, what we'll do is I'll pull this, okay, and as you can see, when I do things with it, it moves around, and it doesn't take much. So as you can see there, just that little tiny bit, and I maybe moved it a 1/4 inch, if that. Made all the difference in the world. So I'm gonna put it right there. Okay, that's where I feel comfortable. I'm gonna come to the other side now and do the same thing. So we wanna get this as even as possible. So you can see that when I pull on it, I'm not pulling more than about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. I got that just where I want it right there. So a little bit is plenty. And there's no general rule of thumb of where this thing needs to be set. So what you're doing is you're eyeballing it yourself. The biggest thing I can say if you want a general rule of thumb is to make sure that front porch pole touches the ground, okay? Don't do this in a carpeted area. Try to find a hard surface. We like using tables. The reason I like a table is because it's up, so I can get around with it a little bit easier, but I'm on a flat surface, and that's what I want out of it all. Because if you're on a crooked surface or an angled, when you get onto the ice, it's gonna look totally different from the way you actually set it before. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're on a flat surface, a hard surface, and that way you'll be able to set your tent properly. All right, so we're ready to put the U-channel on. So what we like to do here is I like to staple these tents in. The reason that I'm doing that is it's set and it's in place. So just makes things a little bit easier. So that is an option that you can do. You want to get an industrial size stapler, something like this that can really grab, because you're putting it through the tent and the tub at the same time. So if you got one of these, definitely can use it. If you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. It's a very simple process to do this if you did not have a stapler to do this. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to leave my C-claps in, like I have here. I'm going to leave those in place because I want the tent to sit where it's at. Okay, then what I'll do is I'll grab my U-channel. So as you can see, this is nice and pliable. It's very, very, very pliable. I can do whatever I really want with it, okay? And I'm going to grab my screws. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move this forward for the time being, put that on the ground. And so if you did not have staples, which is just fine, you're gonna wanna start in the center of this house. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the center of this U-channel here, okay? So just like so, find our center, okay? And then what we're gonna do from there is we're gonna move around. So I've got the one sitting inside. I like to use an impact for this, like a magnetic extension. And all that does is that just keeps that screw in place for me so when I'm ready to install it. So now that we've got it, I've got the back side folded. I'm going to just screw that first one into place. You don't need to go tight on this. As soon as it goes in and you feel a little bit of tension on the drill, stop. You don't need much. So it's already in there. And now from this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work around this house and I'm gonna put it on. I like to take my thumb and run it through the center of the channel. That's just gonna open it up. And then from there, I can just work this thing on. So if you're using a bucket of hot water, you're gonna wanna go fast because it will cool it down quick and it could make it hard. So, all right, I got that part. So now at that, I wanna take this off. I don't need this anymore. Basically, when you put that screw in the center, you've got your tent locked in place. So now we're gonna go around, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish this whole section and get the other one, and we'll get back to screwing it in. All right, so now that we've got the U-channel wrapped around, what I'm gonna do is I wanna go along, and I just wanna feel for stuff. So I'm gonna run along this, and I'm just gonna make sure everything's pushed up, but when I get to these corners, I wanna take my fingers on the inside, and you're gonna feel that it bulges out when you hit the corner. It's just a crease. There's nothing you can do to avoid that. But what I do is, while it's still warm, I just kind of mold it back into where it should be. So I'll do that. I'll go to the other side and do that as well. And then the next thing what we're gonna do is we're gonna wanna cut the U-channel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a cutter. You know, you can use the scissors for this. There's no real wrong or right way to do it. So we just have pretty much, you know, like metal cutters here. So what I'm gonna do is I wanna find 8 inches from the rear of the mounting bracket. So what I'm gonna do is I'll try to outline this the best I can. You can see that crease right there. That's the mounting bracket. Okay, so now I'm coming down. Right there is the rear of my mounting bracket, okay? So then 8 inches. Okay, I use my fingers. This is 8 inches across. And what I'll do is I'll line that up. So now that I know that I have 8 inches right here, okay, I'm gonna hold that in place just like so. I'll pull this down and clip it right there. So what you're doing with that is you're giving it that extra space for that tent to freely move. Because if you bring this as close as you can to that mounting bracket, things are gonna hang up right here. So you want this to be able to move freely as it's supposed to. So I'm gonna do that for the other side, and then we'll put the screws in and we'll be ready to go fishing. So we've got everything there. We've got our center done. We've got the U-channel wrapped around. So we're gonna go around and put in the rest of our screws. So you don't need to use every single one that comes in the package. If you want to, that's just fine. But I like to spread them apart. So just remember that this screw is going through the U-channel, the tent, and the tub. So it's not gonna go anywhere. So don't be too worried about that. So what I'll do is I'll spread them out evenly. There's no specific way of how you have to do it, how far apart they have to be. But I just kind of make it up. Once again, do not go too tight on these. Just get them there because you do not want it to sink through the U-channel. Okay, so then I'll find my next one. I'll say it's right there. Okay, that one's in. Now what I'm gonna do, the corner to me is the most important part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one screw, I'm gonna put it right here. Okay, and then I'm gonna go right into my center. Do one right there. And then also I'm gonna do one right here. So I think the corners are the most vital part of the fish house. That's the stuff that's gonna move around a little bit. That's gonna have the most tension. So I wanna make sure that that is completely secured. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a couple more. I'll put one right here. And then I will put one at the end. Now don't go too close to the end. You know, keep it at least, you know, like almost a 1/4 inch off of it. And screw it in there. So now that I've got all that done, what I'm gonna do is repeat the other side, and we're ready to go. All right, now that we have the tent done, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys how to install your skirt when you're out fishing. So when you're in transport, things like that, you're not gonna wanna have it installed. So this will be a real quick way and real quick, easy video of how to do that. So when I talked about those hooks earlier, what we've got is we've got a hole here, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take both sides and we're gonna slide those into it. Now you gotta kind of work this thing a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna find our hole, and that's gonna slide in like so. Then what we will do is we will attach, clipped in like that, and then the Velcro. So we'll take the Velcro and work it down. Okay, so now it's on like that, and then we can't forget that we've got these side pieces. So those little clips in the side there, if you look on here, you're gonna find an open spot with the cord there, okay? So that cord is going to wrap around. This is why I said to leave it loose so you can kind of work it on there. So I got that side on there, and what I would do is I'd repeat that same process for the other side, and we have our skirt done. So remember, at the end of the night, when you're done fishing for the day or you're traveling to the next spot, make sure to take this apart. So it's as simple as we just did it. Unclipping, pulling the Velcro, okay, and then this would all slide off. And then what you can do is you can pack that inside the house and on to your next spot. So now we're all done, we're ready to go. So now we're gonna stow it away. So one thing you're gonna wanna do too is you've got Velcro on the inside here, okay? So if you notice, you'll see that you have one for each one of your hoop poles, okay? So real quick, before we stow this away, we're gonna do the same thing like we did when we were putting the tent on the hoop poles, okay? I'm gonna leave a bunch of room there, and I'm just gonna go and put those on to the other 3, like so. So it's pretty repetitive, pretty easy. But when we get done with that process, the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna stow the house and put it away. So what we'll do from this point is what I like to do is I like to start from the back. So I'm gonna start from the rear hoop pole. You can do this by yourself. This is up on a table, so we've got 2 people doing this. My arms are not long enough for this thing. It's a big house. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from the rear, and all we're doing is our RPSX clips, okay? We're gonna pull it down, we're gonna unclip it on both sides. So you're gonna see that side go, and then we'll move to the center. Okay, and that one. Okay, so now we're gonna grab this one, do the same, and then what I like to do at this point is as we're going down, then we're gonna flip it. Okay, so now at that point, now we're on to the final one, okay? And then we're just gonna put that down. So now when we go to stow this thing away and put everything, we wanna keep it neat and tight. So this will come with a travel cover, so you can put that on afterwards. But what I like to do is when I'm done, I just like to make sure everything's pushed on the inside of this house. I just want everything off the ground. I don't want it hitting the snow. If you're going on a big run somewhere and that flips out, it could really eat it up if it's sitting there flapping across the lake, hitting the ice chunks and all that stuff in the hard snow. So we've got everything put away. We're ready to rock and roll. We're ready to go fishing. So this is the X300, and this is Mike Raetz with Clam Outdoors. We'll see you on the ice.